Say your name and spell it.
Raymond Peterson, P-E-T-E-R-S-O-N.
What was your official title on the railroad?
I was a locomotive engineer.
Slide over just a bit, your name. Okay, let's just go for it.
Okay. So we're super excited to have you. Thanks for coming. So we're doing a documentary to talk about the history of the trains and Union Station. So I wondered if you could talk about why Union Station's important to Ogden.
Used to be a lot of activities going on here. When I got in the engine service in 1978, and after I was qualified, I was force assigned to be the fireman on Amtrak number 5 and number 6. That's when the Union Pacific crews operated the trains for the government. And it was a very good job because I only had to work every third day, and I'd leave in the morning, and we'd be coming down Depot 2 probably about 10:30 in the evening. And a lot of times they would, well actually most of the time, they would put a Union Pacific locomotive on the front of it, on the point, because it had a higher engine overspeed on it than the Amtrak units did. The passenger style locomotives, what we call cover wagons. EMD, E8s, and E9s is what we ran. And the federal government paid the railroad a performance bond. I heard sometimes it would be like $1 million a month for on-time service. The UP would get the train late from the Burlington Northern in Denver, and we would bring it here to Ogden and hand it off to the Southern Pacific, either on time or ahead of time. And over in Wyoming, on parts of what they called the unrestricted track, we would operate that train 110 miles an hour. So you're really cutting the fog when you do that. And you'd time yourself with a quarter miles. So many taps meant you equated that to the speed. You didn't have time to look at anything because you had to react very fast. But you'd come into the depot and you know, they'd hold weddings here and social events and things like that. And sometimes we'd get in here at night, and maybe there was a dance going on in the main concourse, and I walked in the door, and there you go in the main concourse. There was an operator station over there where we would get our train orders and things like that. And some woman came up and grabbed me and waltzed me right across the dance floor, and I was on duty. So. And then, are you familiar with John Madden, the former coach of the Oakland Raiders and NFL commentator? He had a fear of flying. And he was a regular visitor here that would ride between like the West Coast and Chicago. And we would see him quite often. He's a nice guy.
What year was that?
Oh goodness. It would be in the early 80s. After he was no longer the coach for the Oakland Raiders, when he was doing commentary for Fox or somebody, I don't know which one he was on. But the 6900, this old girl here, I probably put a lot of miles on that thing. And these things, you know, they had them built for their hotshot service, their time freight. And they had SD40-2 locomotives, similar to that one over there, the SP, that were geared real high. And they'd put 2 of them between 2 of these. They called them kickers because they could make transition. They could shift to a lower gear when you hit the hill and give you a boost. But these things were fun to run. And I was, as I recall, one afternoon we had a train called the Super Van, hottest train on the railroad. And I came off the Clearfield Hill going to Salt Lake City, going west. and railroad direction west. And these things, if you read the plaque, it said that they were geared up, they could go 91 miles an hour. And they would let us fudge a little bit. You were carded to go 70 down through there, but they'd give you 5 to 7 over. And I came off the Clearfield Hill, and I was booking about 75 miles an hour, and I hit the Gentile Street road crossing. And I'd backed out of the throttle a little bit to coast down the hill. And I got right up on it again, and a guy in a little green convertible sports car pulled up alongside and honked at us and waved. And then he took off, and of course the speed limit on the interstate was 55 miles an hour. And we got over there around Lagoon, and he was waiting for us again, and then he blasted off, and we were going 75 miles an hour. And he took off and disappeared. And we got under the overpass at the Centerville OS, it'd be Centerville, and my goodness, Utah Highway Patrol had him pulled over, and the cops waving his arms. Looked like he was downright unfit to talk to. I don't know what the hell happened to him, but I'm sure he got a ticket. But you could always tell when the railroad swap out the prime movers, the diesels on these things, and they'd put them in other locomotive chassis. And if you got an SD40-2 like that one over there, and the dipstick was on the wrong side, you knew it came out of a 6900, because the dipsticks were on the engineer side. But with respect to the depot, there used to be a big elm tree right in the middle there, and there was a circle that went around, and when I'd come to work, I'd always park my pickup truck under the tree. And I don't know, anything else you want to know?
You were telling me a story about the 6900. You're telling me a story about the 6900, how it got its nickname.
The class locomotive is the first one they built, and that was 6900, the 6900. And that was known as Big John, because on its first trip it made, going to Los Angeles, John Wayne rode on the locomotive. I don't think he rode it all the way, but parts of the way here and there, he rode on the locomotive. And that's the story. I don't know what else I can tell you, to be honest with you.
So in its heyday, did the train industry really have a big effect on the economics of the area, because they were higher paid employees and there was a lot of them?
I would assume it probably did. Going to work for one of the railroads here was always one of the prized jobs, one of the places that you wanted to work for.
So tell us about the other guys. I mean, you got the World War II vets that are the greatest generation. I've learned that these guys are every bit the same place as those.
Say that again.
So you know what I'm asking?
The railroad people, how, they describe the World War II people as the greatest generation. How would they describe the railroad men? What is their strong point?
Well, I know one thing. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and there were a lot of veterans that worked for the railroad, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. You could go to the register room when you're going to work, and I think you could have a VFW meeting. Every branch of the service was recommended: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, even the Coast Guard. And the railroad's something that I always wanted to do. Railroad was my family business. And I worked, retirement credited me with 42 and a half years of service. 38 was with the Union Pacific. Our family all worked for the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad in South Dakota. And I had worked for the Milwaukee Railroad for a while and the Burlington Northern Railroad for a while. It was just something I was going to do. something I knew about. You know, you heard about this at the dinner table. And that's about it.
Yeah, what is the romance with trains? Why are the trains such a romantic thing?
I don't really know how to answer that. Like I said, this is just something that I was geared up to do, and I always wanted to be a locomotive engineer. And I got to do it. I would have to say that there are probably more attorneys than there are people that can say they were a qualified locomotive engineer on the Union Pacific Railroad. That's something to be said right there.
I think that's good.
Okay, you did great.
All right.